Princess Cyan Veyrath had been raised to believe two things without question: that the Kesh bloodline was sacred, and that humans were beneath notice. 3 years of exile on Earth, hiding inside the gray concrete walls of the Velmara embassy on the edge of a rain-soaked human city, had only confirmed the first belief, and quietly, stubbornly complicated the second. Her father had sent 6 elite guards with her when the conclave fell, warriors of the Thessian order, bonded to their blades since the age of 7, their reflexes sharpened by neural lacing until a human eye could barely track their movements. They stood at every door of the embassy in obsidian armor, silent and immovable, and Cyan had grown up believing that nothing in the galaxy could touch her while they breathed. It was a comforting belief. It was also, as it turned out, wrong. Her maid was a different matter entirely. Mara Voss had come through the embassy's domestic staffing contract 18 months earlier, quiet, unremarkable, somewhere in her 30s, with calloused hands and a habit of humming under her breath while she ironed. She kept Cyan's chambers immaculate, brewed the bitter ashroot tea that settled a Kesh stomach better than any human remedy, and never once looked the princess in the eye unless spoken to first. The elite guards called her the broom when they thought Cyan couldn't hear, and Cyan had let it go, because the guards were warriors, and Mara was simply Mara, kind, steady, easy to forget in a household built around the language of armor and rank. It was the only mistake the household ever made. The assassins came on the 14th night of the monsoon season, when the rain was loud enough to swallow footsteps and the embassy's perimeter sensors were half blind with static from the storm. There were 9 of them, core Vantal mercenaries, judging by the ion disruption blades, the kind hired by whoever in the new conclave wanted Cyan's claim to the throne permanently and quietly erased before she ever reached adulthood. The first guard, Dessen, died without a sound. A monofilament wire opened his throat as he turned a corner, and he folded to the floor so quietly that the second guard didn't notice for 11 seconds. 11 seconds that cost him his life too. A disruption blade punching through the gap in his cuirass before he'd even finished drawing his weapon. Cyan woke to the smell of ionized blood and the embassy's alarm grill flashing red across her ceiling. "Stay down," Mara said, already moving toward the door. It wasn't a request. Cyan, who had never once heard her maid raise her voice in 18 months, found herself flat against the floorboards before she'd consciously decided to move at all. Through the gap beneath her door, she watched the rest of it happen, and none of it made sense. The third guard, Corin, met 2 assassins in the hallway and fought well. Cyan would give him that, later, when there was time to give anyone credit for anything. His blade caught one across the chest in a spray of dark blood, and for a moment it looked like the Order's training might hold against whatever this was. Then the second assassin's hand snapped forward and something small and silver buried itself in Corin's throat, and he was on the ground before his partner's body had finished falling beside him. The 4th and 5th guards came together, back to back, the formation they'd drilled 10,000 times on the training decks of their home world. It didn't matter here. The assassins weren't fighting like soldiers, they were fighting like the building itself was a weapon, using the dark, the angles, the guards' own momentum against them. Cyan watched both men go down within seconds of each other, and somewhere in her chest something cold and final settled into place. They are going to die, all 6 of them, and I am next. The 6th guard, Theo, the youngest, the one who still sometimes smiled at her in the corridors when no one else was watching, made it as far as Cyan's door before a blade found the seam under his arm. He hit the wall beside her threshold and slid down it, and through the gap she could see his hand still reaching, uselessly, toward the handle. The door opened anyway. Cyan flinched back, certain it was finally over, and found herself looking not at an assassin but at Mara, standing in the doorway in her plain gray dress, perfectly still, perfectly calm, with Theo's fallen sidearm already in her hand as though it had always belonged there. "Princess," Mara said, in the same even voice she used to announce that breakfast was ready. "Eyes closed would be easier on you, but I understand if you'd rather watch." Cyan did not close her eyes. What followed didn't look like the fighting Cyan had grown up around. No roaring, no grand sweeping strikes for the cameras of court. Mara moved like punctuation, brief and exact. The first assassin came around the corner already swinging, and Mara simply wasn't where the blade landed. She was a half-step inside it instead, 2 fingers driven into the soft hollow beneath his jaw, and he was down before his own momentum finished carrying him forward. The second one she shot without seeming to aim at all, a single round through the narrow gap in his collar where the armor plates didn't quite meet. The exact gap, Cyan would realize much later, that Thessian Order armorers had spent 40 years failing to fix. 3 more came at once, and Mara folded the fight into the narrow hallway as if she'd designed the corridor herself, letting their numbers crowd them into each other, putting a wounded man's body between herself and a fourth man's line of fire, taking Theo's blade off the floor without breaking stride to open the throat of someone reaching for her from behind. She never raised her voice. She never looked rushed, even once. At one point she paused, actually paused, for less than a second, almost lazily, to roll a thrown blade aside with the flat of her palm, the way someone might swat away a persistent fly. The last two tried to run, and didn't make it. When it was over, 6 bodies and 3 unconscious mercenaries lay scattered across a corridor that, 90 seconds earlier, had been guarded by 6 of the deadliest soldiers the Kesh conclave could produce. Mara stood in the middle of it with not a single drop of blood on her gray dress, breathing exactly as evenly as she had when she'd brought in the morning tea. She looked, for the first time since Cyan had known her, directly into the princess's eyes. "I made a promise to your mother," Mara said quietly, crouching to retrieve a dropped blade, before the conclave fell, "that whatever happened to her, I'd see you safely to your throne. I didn't think it would take this long, or that I'd have to do it disguised as someone's housemaid." A ghost of something, not quite a smile, crossed her face. "The Order's collar seam has been a weakness for 40 years. I told your father's quartermaster twice. He told me staffing matters weren't my concern." Cyan, still on the floor among the wreckage of her father's finest soldiers, found she couldn't speak. "You should know," Mara added, crouching now beside Theo, relief flickering briefly across her face when she found a pulse. "There will be more of them. Whoever sent these 9 will send more, now that they know you're alive and that your guard has fallen." She looked up. "I'd like to keep doing the laundry, if it's all the same to you. It's a good cover, and I've grown fond of this household. But I won't be the broom anymore. I think we're past that, you and I." It was the longest sentence Mara had spoken in 18 months, and the first moment Cyan understood that the woman who'd ironed her clothes and brewed her tea had, in fact, been guarding her life the entire time, quietly, completely, without once asking for the title or the credit that came with it. "No," Cyan managed finally, pushing herself upright. "Not the broom, not anymore." She looked at the 6 soldiers her father had chosen, and at the one maid no one had thought to look at twice. "What should I call you then?" Mara considered the question as though it genuinely mattered to her. "Mara will do," she said. "It always has." Outside, the monsoon rain kept falling, indifferent to how thoroughly the world inside that corridor had just rearranged itself.